Spanish cuisine differs radically from that of her former colony, Mexico. Many people tend to confuse the two, but they are really worlds apart. Spanish foods are ancient, steeped in the traditions of a sunny, barren land. The food takes on an austerity that reflects the very landscape. Spanish food is remarkably uncomplex and straightforward. The seasonings are subtle, allowing the natural flavors to predominate. Spain grows much of her own food. As in all the Mediterranean countries, tomatoes and onions figure in many dishes. Spain produces outstanding olives and lovely oranges, too. She is known the world around for her almonds and her vineyards. Garlic, our old friend, sneaks in and about, too. Sometimes extremely bold, but usually subtle. Parsley is used with such abandon, it becomes an ingredient of note rather than just a garnish. Spain is famous for her cured hams, and they find their way into hundreds of dishes. The Spaniards differ from other cultures in many ways. The most obvious is at mealtime. I've seen many a greenhorn tourist enter a deserted restaurant at 8 o'clock in the evening to find a shocked, unprepared captain and staff. They expect everyone to show up at 10 or even 11 for a fashionably late dinner. But food is available almost any time and anywhere. Sidewalk cafes abound, and there are bars that serve nothing but sherry and tinta, or red Spanish wine, and tapas, the Spanish version of appetizers or hors d'oeuvres. Food is eaten in drips and drabs all day long, filling in the pains of appetite until the evening meal. Tapas are a national institution. Most early evenings are devoted to tapas and conversation, another national art. Some of my most pleasant memories of Spain center around long, mild evenings with many a glass of tinta wine and a staggering variety of tapas on that fascinating street in Madrid called the Ichigaray. There are establishments that specialize in tapas, and they offer virtually hundreds of hors d'oeuvres. It's agonizing to even try to decide with that sort of variety, but I found I always leaned heavily towards hard-boiled quail eggs with a bone-dry sherry. The possibilities, however, were endless. I've chosen some of the tapas that can be most easily recreated. I generally put classical guitar music on the stereo, and then I light the candles, uncork the sherry, and bring out a large tray of tapas. The guests are sometimes shocked. They probably expected firewater and potato chips. But we are more civilized than that. With tapas and enough sherry, conversation, that dying art, may see a revival. Well, count me in the spearhead for that campaign. Well, now for our tapas. First of all, Spain's national treasure, the big black ripe olives. The larger the olive, the better. Colossal is not quite big enough. And green olives, too. I like both the pimento stuffed ones and the ones stuffed with almonds. Little bowls of salted almonds and hazelnuts are quite welcome, too. These are the easiest tapas to achieve. A little judicious can and jar opening solves these problems. Canapes are extremely popular. Anchovies, tuna, and sardines figure heavily. I was quite taken by little squares of crisp buttered toast spread with a lemon tuna pate. I first trimmed the crust from 6 slices of bread and cut them into squares, and then I buttered them generously and baked them at 375 degrees for about 20 minutes. I then prepared the tuna pate. I thoroughly drain a 6-ounce can of water-packed tuna. Then you flake the tuna with a fork until it's very light and fluffy. Then you mix in 2 heaping tablespoons of mayonnaise and 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I thinly shred enough lemon peel to make about 2 tablespoons full and stir that in also. I then pack the pate into a little stoneware crock and serve it on a plate surrounded by the squares of toast. It's really delicious. I always make sure I do a batch of pinchos, too. Now, these are skewers of almost anything. Kidneys or mushrooms are probably the most popular. You know how I feel about mushrooms, so as you can imagine, they are my choice. I select medium-sized mushrooms and wash them in a plastic bag. I then thread them 3 at a time on bamboo skewers soaked in water. I then melt a cube of butter with a smashed garlic clove. I brush the mushrooms heavily with melted butter, sprinkle them with granulated pepper, and broil them for about 4 minutes, and then serve them. I never serve all the tapas at once, but I bring them out slowly, kind of teasing my guests. It keeps them on the edge with anticipation, believe me, wondering what treat may be next. When I serve sherry, I choose the very driest sherry available. A sweet one would spoil everyone's taste. It would just taste awful with the tapas. Now, this selection of hors d'oeuvres should keep everyone occupied and involved in conversation for several hours. What a delight, truly, what a delight. Grown people talking to each other in a civilized fashion about things that matter, like art and music and food. Spain's most famous dish is paella. Every major town claims to have the definitive recipe. It's rather like America's squabble over fried chicken. Everyone's grandmother cooked it best. Well, the Spanish are no different. Every region has its own chauvinistic pride. So we have many, many versions of paella. For the uninitiated, paella is a dish of rice, chicken, shellfish, sausage, and any number of vegetable garnishes. Its name comes from the pan used to cook it, a large shallow pan with sloping sides and 2 handles. Since most of you don't own paella pans, a large iron frying pan or a large deep electric skillet will do quite nicely. I have chosen to modify a traditional recipe called Arroz Parellada. This is rice with boned chicken and shellfish. I chose this because the boned chicken and the shelled shellfish are much easier for my guests to cope with. So to begin with, I heat 7 cups of water to boiling in a large pot. I put in a large chicken cut into pieces and a pound of roasting pork cut into pieces. I simmer this until the chicken is tender, and then I add 2 dozen clams and let them cook until they open. Strain off the liquid and save it. Bone the chickens and shell the clams. I usually leave 6 or 7 in their shells just for a garnish. I then heat a half cup of olive oil in my large pan. I fry the chicken, the pork, and the clams in the oil and add a ½ pound of large cooked shelled shrimp. When everything is lightly browned, I add 8 artichoke hearts cut in quarters and 2/3 of a cup of frozen peas. I also stir in 2 cups of rice and keep cooking and stirring till the rice is lightly browned. In the meantime, I heat the strained reserved liquid to boiling. When it's ready, I add 5 cups of the boiling liquid seasoned with 1½ tablespoons of spice salt and a pinch of saffron dissolved in it. Stir it just enough to mix everything. Let it boil furiously until the rice begins to absorb some of the liquid. I then reduce the flame to low and continue to cook the paella for 10 or 15 minutes until the rice is done. Don't stir it or the rice will become, well, it becomes horribly sort of gummy. It cooks beautifully when it's undisturbed. I let the paella repose for about 5 minutes or so before serving. I found that blends all the flavors together. Most people have never eaten a paella. The unusual flavor achieved by cooking fowl, pork, and shellfish together is a more than pleasant surprise. This dish cries for a brilliant white wine, and I prefer a poulet fumé or a white burgundy. A Colombor could be used, or white sangria is also authentic. The wine and the paella create an unforgettable dining experience. The paella has virtually everything in it. The only fitting side dish is a salad. The Spanish don't serve tossed salads, but rather platters of vegetables dressed with a simple vinaigrette dressing. I generally prefer Ensalada Catalana, a salad served in the style of Catalonia, a province in Spain. I break up 2 heads of washed romaine, then I cover a platter with the lettuce. Now our artistic sense can be unleashed. This is a composed salad as opposed to a mixed salad. So I slice 6 ripe red tomatoes, 2 sweet white onions, and 2 green peppers. If red peppers are available, I add 2 of them too. These can make a stunning pattern of red, green, and white. Come on, be fancy. This is no time to skimp or to be a piker. Now add black olives in every place possible. I then refrigerate this until serving time. When it's ready to serve, I drizzle a mixture of 1/2 cup oil and 1/2 cup wine vinegar and a teaspoonful of spice salt and 1 of granulated pepper all over your composition. I sometimes put cruets of oil and vinegar on the table with the salad. Guests can never resist tinkering with seasoning, so let them. The salad and the paella are a stunning pair. These are unfamiliar foods, but one taste will leave your guests at your mercy, begging for more. My goodness, our reputation grows by leaps and bounds, doesn't it? Spanish desserts are generally based on eggs, milk, and unbelievable amounts of sugar. The flavorings are generally vanilla and cinnamon. I use Watkins vanilla because it has superior strength and it holds its flavor during the cooking process. We're going to make a flan. This is a classic egg custard with a burnt sugar syrup. I make the custard in individual cups because I find nothing quite as enchanting as my very own dessert. A holdover of childish greed, I have no doubt. Nonetheless, first preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Then simmer 4 cups of milk for 6 minutes with a sliver of orange peel and a stick of cinnamon, 1 tablespoonful of vanilla, and 1 cup of sugar. In the meantime, melt 2/3 of a cup of sugar in a small, heavy skillet over a low flame. Now watch it carefully because it'll scorch very easily. When the sugar is liquid and golden brown, divide it evenly between the 6 custard cups, pouring it into the bottom. Let the milk cool for a few minutes and then pour it into a bowl with 4 lightly beaten eggs, stirring it constantly. Now, if any foam accumulates, remove it faithfully. Foam makes bubbles in baked custard, and it isn't pretty. Now, fill your molds with the custard and place them in an oblong baking pan. Fill the baking pan 2/3 full of cold water. Place the pan in the heated oven and bake the custards for 40 minutes. The custard is done when the top is firm and lightly browned. Chill these thoroughly in the refrigerator. Unmold them just before serving, dipping each mold in hot water for a second or so to release it. I serve these with a lot of hot black coffee. I usually have almonds on the table again and a plate of butter cookies. This is a fitting ending for a Spanish meal, a simple yet somehow a complex juxtaposition of textures and flavors. The famous Spanish flan. Now put on some more classical guitar music, bring out an ancient sweet sherry or a port, put your feet up, and enjoy your marvelous food and your marvelous guests. Everyone should be thoroughly satiated and satisfied. A classical Spanish evening.